is going to talk about a yoga a figure, a well-known celebrity figure, globally known yoga figure, Kṛṣṇamācārya ji. But she's going to present him as Sarva-Tantra-Svatantra. I'll give a brief introduction. She is currently the director, Kṛṣṇamācārya Yoga Mandiram, Chennai. Nrithya Jagannathan is a senior yoga therapist from the Kṛṣṇamācārya tradition and was a direct student of renowned Yogacharya Sri T.K.V. Deshikācārya for over 14 years. With over 22 years of teaching experience, she is currently the director of the KYM Institute of Yoga Studies, the training and certification wing of the Kṛṣṇamācārya Yoga Mandiram. She has traveled extensively around the world to teach yoga, yoga therapy, and Vedic chanting, and is a certified therapist from the International Association of Yoga Therapists. Nrithya is currently also an expert advisor to the certification committee of the IAYT. She is the chairperson of the IYA Tamil Nadu State Subcommittee for Academic Courses and Examinations. She was honored with the Yogini Award for Tamil Nadu State at Paramartha Niketan Rishikesh in February 2023 and recognized as one of the senior yoga therapists across India to be honored with the Yoga Chikitsa Acharya title from Indian Yoga Association in 2023 as well. She has also been honored with the Yoga Lakshmi Puraskara by Adhyatma Academy, Bengaluru for her contributions to yoga studies. Deeply passionate about all aspects of Indian literature, culture, and philosophy, Nrithya is also the editor-in-chief of Darshanam, the quarterly journal of Yoga and Yoga Chikitsa of Kṛṣṇamācārya Yoga Mandiram. Further, Nrithya is also a professional Bharatanatyam artist with over 35 years of experience. She has performed extensively in India and abroad. She has been conferred many titles by prominent sabhas in Chennai, including Yuvakala Bharati from Bharat Kalachar, Nrithya Jyoti from Karthik Fine Arts. So we are very clear that she herself is multi-talented, versatile person, and she is the student of Sarva-Tantra-Svatantra. She is the Prashishya of Sarva-Tantra-Svatantra Kṛṣṇamācārya Yogi, and she is going to talk about him, about Kṛṣṇamācārya Guruji. Over to you, Nrithya Jagannathan.
Namaskaram, Nagaraj-ji. Thank you so much. Warm greetings to all who are watching. At the outset, I must say that I'm here before you not as a scholar, but as a Shishya. As a Shishya of a great Parampara. And I hope that in this forum, as Nagaraj-ji has given me this wonderful opportunity to be present among stalwarts, a galaxy of, I think, the greatest polymaths that India has seen, that to be present here to speak of my Guru Parampara is the greatest blessing. Gurum Prakashayet Dhiman is a very well-known statement, and it is this that I hope to place before you. Lakshmīnath Samarambham Nathayamuna Madhyamam Asmadacharya Paryantam Vande Guru Paramparam. Shri Krishna Vagi Shayatishwarabhyam Samprapta Chakrankana Bhashyasaram Shrinutnarangendra Yato Samarpitasvam Shri Kṛṣṇamācāryam Guruvaryamīde Virodhe Kartike Mase Shatatara Kritodayam Yogacharyam Kṛṣṇamācāryam Guruvaryamaham Bhaje. Krishnasure Patram Jnana-Vairagya-bhushanam Srimad Venkatanathāryam Vandeham Yoga-deshikam Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. What is known about Sri Kṛṣṇamācārya is that he was a legendary yogi, a yogacharya. The world of yoga has greatly benefited from Sri Kṛṣṇamācārya's contributions, and these are very well known. He was appointed to head the Yogashala at the Mysore Palace by His Holiness Nalvadi Krishnaraj Odayar in the early 1930s. He was a significant contributor to the revival of yoga, yoga sadhana in contemporary India, especially post a period of very significant, very rapid decline under colonial rule. And Sri Kṛṣṇamācārya is attributed to be the source as the Acharya to four major yoga traditions that till today find popularity the world over. The traditions of Srimati Indra Devi, who was possibly one of the first women and the first non-Indian woman to have studied under Sri Kṛṣṇamācārya at the Mysore Shala, and later Sri B.K. Saingar, Sri Patabi Joyce, and much later in Sri Kṛṣṇamācārya's own life, Sri T.K.V. Desikachar, his son and student for over 3 decades. There are, in the context of Sri Kṛṣṇamācārya and his Vidvat, a number of malevolent claims questioning his Vidvatvam. Specifically, David Gordon White asks, how can it be that in spite of his brilliance and extensive training, Kṛṣṇamācārya comes across as barely cognizant of the Yoga Sutra that had been the presumed object of his Sankhya Yoga instruction, as also his 7 years of discipleship in Tibet with Rama Mohana Brahmachari? He continues, while his biographers repeatedly stress the depth of Sri Kṛṣṇamācārya's teachings on Yoga Sutra philosophy from 1961 to the end of his life, teachings that featured exhaustive reference of the classical commentaries and glossing of Patanjali Sanskrit, none of his later writings show any evidence of progress beyond the superficial and inaccurate treatment of the subject found in his 1935 and 41 works. Further, there are other claims that question Kṛṣṇamācārya's understanding and mastery of asanas, attributing much of his work to have been plagiarized, copied from fitness regimens run at European-run gymnasiums. In counter, Kṛṣṇamācārya was a man of few words, reticent to speak of himself as indicated in his own biography by his son and student Sri Desikachar. He was one of 322 Vaidyas from across Bharata, practicing various forms of chikitsa, who were chosen to participate in a survey conducted by the government of India. This was a survey taken up to study the implications of indigenous systems of medicine, taken up in 1946, just prior to independence, and subsequently published as a report of the Committee on Indigenous Systems of Medicine by the Government of India, 1948. In counter again, we have Sri B.K. Saingar in his foreword to the biography of Kṛṣṇamācārya, very well known that there was an underlying, you could say, subtle resentment between Sri Iyengar and Sri Kṛṣṇamācārya for various reasons. Nevertheless, he writes in his foreword, it is impossible for a humble student like myself to measure his caliber and stature. A man of firm discipline, perseverance, and persistence in his precept and practice. A living yogi of the century, a versatile personality, a fountain of knowledge, an encyclopedia on all facets of Shruti, Smriti, Upanishad, Darshana, Itihasa, and Purana. All subject matters were at his fingertips. His powerful memory never let him down, not even once. Let us take a look at Sri Kṛṣṇamācārya's birth, his origins, his early education, and how this served as the base for the great teacher and visionary that he became. Sri Kṛṣṇamācārya's family traces its lineage to Sri Natha Muni, to Ishwara Muni, also known as Ishwara Bhatta, the 9th century, whose son was Natha Muni, 9th century yogi, and through the line of the daughter, we see that the family ancestry is traces to the Tirumalayars of, they were known for performing Kainkarya, the Tirumalai temple in Tirupati. They were known as Tatacharyas. And you see also here a Appaya Dikshitar and Shesha Dikshitar, not to be confused with the later Appaya Dikshitar, a contemporary of Vedanta Deshika. But the Dikshitar title was one that was given specifically to those Tatacharyas who had performed Agnihotra as also Vajapaya Yajna, and therefore honored with this title. So this is the genealogy. Sri Kṛṣṇamācārya was born to Srinivasa Tatacharya and Ranganayakama, both of great erudition. And he subsequently went on to have 6 children, one of whom was Sri Desikacharya. In his own words, Sri Kṛṣṇamācārya says, "My first gurus were my parents. My father taught me everything concerning the Vedas and Vedic Sanskrit. My mother taught me everything at other levels concerning society, etc. I was initiated at the age of 5. Even when chanting the Vedas, it was my mother who helped me in understanding the true significance of Vedic recitation. It was she who could always relate to me the things needed for each and every ritual. My parents reminded me of the system of education from parents to children has been in existence since a long time." I think this is a very significant point. This rootedness of the value system coming from from one's own parents, as our Shastras say, Matra Devo Bhava, Pitru Devo Bhava, Acharya Devo Bhava, Atiti Devo Bhava. And this was the foundational ground for what Kṛṣṇamācārya later became. He adds in an interview that was posthumously published in K1 Journal in 1992 about food and education. He says, "When I received my first food from my mother, she not only gave me food, but all necessary information about the food that I was given, what was good and bad. There are many diverse forces in our body, and their vitiation affects the entire system. Without yoga, it is not possible to understand these complex aspects of a human. In this context, yoga means to join. Like the food that is eaten becomes part of the system through different processes, this food that is outside becoming one with ourselves is also yoga. This is how I was first initiated into yoga by my parents in the daily ritual of taking food. They taught me this as Prana Agni Hotra Yogam. Something outside joins in me, whether it is the mother's milk or the food we take. It is only later that I gradually developed other aspects of yoga." Born into the Tirumalai family, Kṛṣṇamācārya had his Upanayanam and the Veda Adhyanam at a very young age of 5. He was initiated by his own father, who was a teacher of Veda, Vedanta, and a number of Shastras, including the Amarakosha. Sri Kṛṣṇamācārya's father's great-grandfather was Sri Srinivasa Brahmatantra Parakala Swami, one of the Mathadipatis of the Parakala Math of Mysore. Post his early initiation into Veda Adhyanam, soon after, Sri Kṛṣṇamācārya lost his biggest pillar of support of learning. His father passed away when he was 10 years of age. Subsequently, the family moved to Mysore to enable Kṛṣṇamācārya's education in the Parakala Matha. He studied Vedanta Kalakshepa and also served at the Matha for 2 years. But through this time, he had a deep yearning to study beyond what he was currently being taught. And with the permission of his guru at the Parakala Math, he made his way to the north. He went to Banaras, where he stayed for many years. His biography says he was as young as 17 when he traveled to Varanasi. Subsequently, he also, in this period, he had studied in Mysore, and he received titles Sankhya Yoga Shikhamani, Mimamsa Ratna, Mimamsa Tirtha, Nyayacharya, Nyaya Ratna, Vedanta Vagisha, Veda Kesari. And we see that he was a prolific scholar, adept in all the Shad Darshanas, Itihasas, and Puranas. Subsequently, he made a trek to Tibet, Manasarovar, seeking the guidance of Rama Mohana Brahmachari, from whom he studied yoga, Hatha Yoga, as also Yoga Shastra. On his return from Mysore, from the Manasarovar mountains, his guru gave him but one task: to return to his country, to marry, raise a family, and to take up the teaching of yoga, to spread the message of yoga. It was this order that he held upon his head. And subsequently, when he came into contact with Nalvadi Krishnaraja Wadiyar, Mysore, he was able to cure the Maharaja of a chronic ailment with his intervention and subsequently was asked to head the Yogashala from 1932 until the Yogashala closed down post independence. Subsequently, with the patronage of the Mysore palace coming down, there was a brief period of turmoil where the family had to go to Anantapur, Dharmavaram, where they struggled for a living. Subsequently, he was invited to Chennai, where he made his life till his till he passed away in 1989 at the age of 101. Study and his teachers, he completed, as I had mentioned, the Shastra Purva Mimamsa Vidwan level at Chamaraja College, Mysore, and had also studied under the tutelage of Brahmashi Shivakumar Shastri, who was a great bhakta of Narasimha. And in his biography, he says that his Acharya had taught him some secret teachings of mantra of Sanskrit Upadesha overnight, and the very next day lost his voice. He also was a student of Mahamahopadhyaya Sri Ganganath Jha and Brahmashri Trilinga Ramashastri for Tarka, as also Rama Mohana Brahmachari for Yoga. His Jnana Parampara, as we trace in his Dhyana Shlokam to Kṛṣṇamācārya, Sri Krishna Vagisha Yatishwarabhyam Samprapta Chakrankana Bhashya Saram. His early education, his Samashrayanam, and the study of Sri Bhashyam happened at the Parkalamat. Later, the Bharanyasam ritual was under the supervision of the second Ranganatha Swami. Despite all of this, in the Dhyana Shloka that Sri Kṛṣṇamācārya composed, he composed at the request of his students on the occasion of his Purnabhisheka. He only identifies himself as a Yogacharya. This was the mandate given to him by his Guru, and this was what he lived to teach the rest of his life. He was a prolific teacher, writer, speaker, fluent in Kannada, Telugu, Hindi, Sanskrita, Tamil as well. He was also familiar with Urdu and various other local dialects. A number of works are in existence, some published, some remain unpublished. Yogasana Gulu, written in Kannada. Yoga Makaranda, written at the behest of the Mysore Maharaja in the early 30s. It was a work composed in just 3 days, but sadly lacking funds. Only one part was published. The Yoga Rahasya attributed to Natha Muni, which Kṛṣṇamācārya has received in a state of dhyanam, in a state of samadhi, at a very mystic experience during his yatra to Alvar Tirunagari when he was a young boy of but 14 or 15. Yoganjali Saram, the later composition on yoga, Sandhya Saram, a remarkable collection of verses on the importance of Sandhya Vandanam and the entire process outlining the various postures that were used, the Dhyanamalika, a poem on the process of Dhyanam, Adishesha Ashtakam, incorporating the Ashtakshari of Adishesha, Hayagriva Ashtakam, Yogavalli, a magnum opus commentary on the Yoga Sutra from a very uniquely Vishishtadvaita lens, one of the only commentaries from a Vishishtadvaita perspective. At the age of 96, he dictated to his son, Chitachit Tattva Mimamsa, his commentary on the Brahma Sutra running to over 116 chapters, a number of Dhyana shlokas on various devatas and essays on an array of themes are his works. The unknown TK, there is much about this master that remains unknown because what he presented to the world was his face as a Yogacharya. I will subsequently come to his contributions as a Yogacharya. In Mysore, he was able to demonstrate to a team of French physicians a capacity to stop his pulse beat. He brought his heartbeat to nil for 2 minutes, subsequently revived it, documented and given with a letter of proof by the attending team of physicians. This was in the 1930s as part of Kṛṣṇamācārya's mission to popularize, to repopularize, to acclimatize the general public to the benefits of yoga. However, a siddhi that he refused to pass on to either his son or his disciples because he said, in this Kali Yoga, this is not needed. What is needed is health and wellness for all. Dementor demonstrated great strength. There are stories that we hear from his students, one narrated by one of the Swamis of the Ramakrishna Math in Chennai, where he was witness to Sri Kṛṣṇamācārya pulling a car with a rope tied to his teeth. Sri Desacharya narrates how in Dharmavaram, at the age of 64, when he was forced out of his job at the Mysore Shala. For over 6 months, Sri Kṛṣṇamācārya would walk 3 kilometers every day to fetch water for the family. They lived in great poverty, so he would walk up and down 3 kilometers to come back carrying 3 pots of water, one on either side, one on his head, at the age of 64. Later, in Chennai, Sri Desikachar has told us that during a flood in Chennai, Sri Kṛṣṇamācārya at that point of time was living in a small house outside the main dwelling. He refused to leave that place. He said, "This is where I would be." The family kept begging him because the water levels were rising. And he said, "You can move me if you want, but I will not move." And Shri Desikachar has told us in his class that they were physically unable to lift this man, a frail man who was well past 90 at this time. Sukshma Vyavahita Viprakrishta Jnanam. He was able to identify, to name objects that were placed in a locked and sealed box. He established the primacy of the Yoga Sutra. Across his teachings, the text that was his go-to was the Yoga Sutra, and his teachings derived only from what he believed the Yoga Sutra authenticated. He was an established expert in Dhanurvidya. He was a master of archery and Mallavidya, was also an expert in horses. He was once asked by the Maharaja of Mysore to vet a horse that had been brought by a trader. Sri Kṛṣṇamācārya assessed the horse, rejected it, asked the trader to bring another horse, which he verified, subsequently was chosen, and that horse served the Maharaja for well over a decade. He was also authorized by Ranganatha Brahmatantra Parakalas Swami to perform Samashrayanam, one of only 6 people who were not part of the Matha lineage to have been given this privilege. He was a Kavi. He could compose instantly. Vainika as well, a student of the great legendary Veena Sheshanna, was an adept in Jyotisha. There are many stories. In fact, there's a very interesting story of a foreign student of Sri Desikachar who had come to him with a horoscope. He took a look at the horoscope and he said, "This man was not born under this Rashi." And the man said, "No, this is my birth certificate." And he said, "No, looking at him, it is not possible. Ask him to go back and verify with the mother." And based on his chart, based on what I read of his face, he had made certain predictions. The man refused to believe, but subsequently, when he asked his mother, it was proven that the birth certificate was erroneous and that Sri Kṛṣṇamācārya's predictions were accurate. He was a versatile cook. In fact, his biography, the people around him have said that he was the one who taught his wife to cook. He married his wife at a very tender age of 14 and is believed to have been a connoisseur and a great cook. Passionate gardener as well, remarkably skilled in Nadi Pariksha. There are so many legendary stories from the teachers at the Mandiram where he would check the Nadi to predict pregnancy even before it had been verified by a doctor, to predict the gender of a baby in uterus. He had also diagnosed a person who had come to him as diabetic, but the man said, "None of my tests revealed that I'm a diabetic." Subsequently, it was proven to be so. He was remarkably skilled in Nadi Pariksha. He was a Vaidya capable of making his own Ayurvedic preparations, a Chikitsaka par excellence. There are ideas that Sri Kṛṣṇamācārya branched into Yoga Chikitsa only later in his life. This is a fallacy. We have records, palace records of him treating, working with dignitaries, diplomats who visited the palace as guests of the Maharaja. He was a righteous warrior for Dharma, specifically Veda Adhyayanam. It was a great matter of sorrow to Kṛṣṇamācārya that the tradition of Veda Adhyayanam was sinking, that those who were to do it were not. And he took what would have been a very, very controversial move for his time, his period, coming from his orthodoxy. He took on the decision to teach women and anyone who was so inclined to learning and preserving the content of the Vedas with sincerity, naturally with several restrictions in place. He said, for the purpose of preservation, I will teach this as an apad dharma. And he engaged in several debates proving his point. Similarly, with the use of kriyas, he was vehement that the kriyas prescribed in the Hatha Yoga literature ought not to be done. A, because they were not referenced by Patanjali. B, because he said, in this present day and time, we do not lack, we do not possess the health and vitality to sustain the kriyas without injury. He demonstrated all the kriyas, though he was accused of not knowing them. He is on video demonstrating every kriya, but he said, I will not teach this because what is needed is a preemptive, promotive, health promotive approach, bare minimum, so that there is no decline in health. given the trend of the present Kali Yuga. He was also very vocal about his views on Kundalini, a very divergent view from most of the later medieval Yoga Shastras, again for the reason that he did not attribute too much importance here. He said it is not stated by Patanjali, but also his view of Kundalini was that what is rising is essentially prana. When there is prana chalanam, when there is the proper stimulation of the Jataragni, there will be prana chalanam and there will be a surge of prana, which is what is felt or what is termed as the Kundalini rising. But Kundalini, he said, was just the accumulation of mala, the Sharira mala and the Chitta mala, that prevented our capacity to comprehend truth that was within. He walked the talk. He was an unwavering adherent to the yamas, again documented by Desikachar and others. He would never accept gifts from any student. Even in his Purnabhisheka, what students offered was received and given back to them. And when the Maharaja would send his attendants with gold, with silver, with precious jewels, they would all be sent back. This has been documented by Kṛṣṇamācārya's family members. Another very important aspect in his life was his recovery from a hip fracture. At the age of 96, the doctors wrote him off. He had a habit of rearranging the furniture in his room depending on the seasons. It so happened that the previous night he had done this. At that time, his wife was also diagnosed with a terminal illness, and he had forgotten that he had shifted the furniture, tripped over, fractured his hip. The doctors said he cannot live, that there is no intervention possible at this age for this man. He disproved them. He went on to bring himself back to be able to walk. Again, these are available on videos, on archival videos. His entire practice at the age of 96, where he revives himself from a hip fracture to go on to celebrate his Purnabhisheka at the age of 100, is very well documented. His memory is something that every student has spoken of, that he had a photographic memory, never relied on text. And what many who attended his Purnabhisheka in 1988 say is that in his Anugraha Bhashanam, he didn't speak. All he did was to chant the Omkara. The time duration that he chanted the Omkara was 50 seconds at the age of 100. Some of his works, there is very quickly, I'll run through this just to show you the cross-section of works of Kṛṣṇamācārya. A Dhyana Shloka on Patanjali composed in 1988. Karayuga Vidrutabhyam Chakra Shankabhidhabhyam Mihira Shashinibhabhyam Ayudhabhyam Pradiptam Dashashata Vitatabhi Prasuptabhi Phanabhi Suyutam Akhila Vandyam Bhogirajam Bhajeham Yasya Smarana Matrena Dehavang Mansam Lamalaha Liyante Tamaham Naumi Patanjali Mahamuni. Yet another composition on Ayurveda. Jivana Jantu Jatanam Pavana Kaya Santatehe Dahana Roga Moolanam Ayurveda Bhajamyam. The Ayurveda Ashtakam, Adishesha Ashtakam, using the Adishesha Ashtakshari. Every verse ends with Tasmai Sheshaya Om Namaha. Beautifully woven into the structure of the Ashtakam. Beautiful Ashtakam in praise of Adishesha, honoring Patanjali. Some excerpts from the Yoganjali Saram, which was composed very similar to the meter of the Mohamudgara. You can see his orientation and what the value system that he believed in. Grinu Gopalam, Smara Turagasyam, Bhaja Guruvaryam Mandamate, Shushke Rakte Kshine Dehe, Nahi Rakshati Kali Yuga Shiksha. Rago Bhogo Yogastyagaha, Chatvaraste Purusharthahi, Balastaruno Vridho Jirnaha, Chatvarastan Bahumanyante. Speaking of the Purusharthas and how they spread over the different stages of life. Tavava Mamava Sadanu Saranat, Namanan Mananat Prasanna Chittaha, Bhagavan Vanchitam Akilam Dattva, Kinte Bhuyaha Priyam Iti Hasati. Of how broad-minded he was. He was a Vaishnava, he was a Bhakta, but he was very generous, broad-minded in not imposing his views on his student, which is borne out here. Parimita Bhoji Sucharita Yaji, Dhvasta Sharira Klesho Yogi, Sustira Chitto Bhagavati Vishnu, Ihaiva Labhate Shantim Paramam. Speaking about how one has to live one's life. This is again from the Dhyana Malika. Very, very interesting ideas. Ma kuru gasmara sangam, ma vada veda viruddham vachanam, maiva lokaya kulavrittina, ma tyaja dharma jivana vrit. How his adherence to the tenets of Sanatana Dharma, kim karoshi kalushita tittaha, kimva jalpasi nirartha vachanam, yavat chittam vimalam pumsaha, tavat saukhyam diviva bhuviva. And so on. There are so many of his works. These are at a very practical level. You also see his scholarship in his commentary to the Yoga Sutra, where he attributes yoga to be dhyanam. Summarily concludes that yoga is dhyanam, chitta vritti nirodha iti cha dhyana. It speaks about dhyana only, dhyana virodhiya, but bahya vishayaka chitta parinama nirodha iti arthaha. And so he brings about this idea of continuously linking the mind to the chosen object. Further, he speaks about how the Jivatma, with the Dharma Bhuta Jnanam and endowed with a mind free from Rajas and Tamas, experiences the form of the Dheya Vastu. And he says this is Samadhi, it can be attained only through the process of Ahamgraha Upasana. His cross-referencing across his commentary is also significant. On Ishvara specifically, Kṛṣṇamācārya takes a stance that no other commentator has taken. Ishvara pranidhanam iti atra Ishvara padam Ishwaram Ishwari cha abhidatte. He says Ishvara padam is Ishvara plus Ishwari, referencing Lakshmi Narayana. Ishwarena sakam Ishwari api jagat srishthyadikam karoti iti abhupeyam. Pancharatra grantheshvidam spashtam upalabhyate. So you see the cross-referencing of the Pancharatras as well. And his position on Ishvara is something I have spoken of before at the Vaishnavism conference as well, where he says Ishvara pranidhanat va is only Ishvara pranidhanat eva. And he develops his debate on why it can only be Ishvara pranidhana as the pathway for practitioners in the Kali Yuga. Similarly here, his commentary on Ekatattva Abhyasa is a treat. He says Ekam cha tattvam cha ekatattvam Ekatattva Abhyasaha Ekatattva Abhyasaha. Who is Ekam? Sarvajñam Sarvashaktimantam Sakalagunam Desha Kala Kriyanavachinna Vidyadi Klesharahitam Sarvashruti Shiro Bhutam Omkara Paryaya Pranava Pratipadyam Anavachinna Ishwaryam Smarana Matra Karmana Sarva Roga Nivartakam Prakrita Guna Samsprishtam Purushakaram Bhagavantam. This is Eka. And then he says the Tattvam Sarva Kala Sarva Desha Sarvavastha Swapya Vikriyam Paripurnanandam Sakala Kalyana Guna Vishishtam Aparinita Audarya Daya Jnana Nidhim Idrishya Tattvasya Nirantara Abhyaso Yoga Abhyasinam Avashyakaha. This is his very beautiful commentary on the Ekatattva Abhyasa Sutra. His derivation of the word yogam from the Bijaksharam. He says Marut Hari Rama Tarksha Bijam Sankalanat Yogam. And he derives this as Yam plus Yam representing Marut, representing Bhagavan, representing Ishwari, Sri Devi, and Gam, the Guru Tattva, Garuda, that is the medium by which we reach Ishwara. These are several excerpts from Kṛṣṇamācārya's conversations with his students. He says, anything can be called yoga, whether it's the relationship between the food and the eater, the coming together of husband and wife, the smell in our air that becomes an olfactory experience. Everything is yoga. His contributions to yoga studies are prolific, very well known. Structured course plans clearly forming a Purvanga, Pradhananga, Uttaranga framework. Asana as a process of Swadhyaya. He says that it is with Swadhyaya that higher processes, deeper processes can be taken up. The role of lengthy Shavasana was something he disputed. He said that in his practices, Shavasana was not a 10-minute affair at the end of the practice, but small periods of rest. Because he said when you build up, when there is a proper preparation and a pratikriya, then the need for a lengthy Shavasana is eliminated. This is carried forth in his work, in the work of the Kṛṣṇamācārya Yoga Mandiram. He was able to bring in different effects of Brahmana Kriya, Langana Kriyas in the pranayama, practices of yoga in alignment with the ashrama dharma for children, for the middle-aged, for the elderly as Srishti, Sthiti and Layakrama. both Shakti Krama and Chikitsa Krama, notation of the Yoga Sutra among a number of other texts, holistic practices of asana, pranayama, mantra, bhavana, japa, nyasam, mudra, and dhyanam. Also, his development of yoga as Ashastra Shastra Chikitsa. He was a skilled therapeutician with an elaborate method, very hands-on method of diagnosis. And one of his most beautiful definitions of yoga is Swatantra, because he said the practice of yoga cannot make you dependent. It has to empower you to find the strength that lies, the truth that lies within you. There are many memories from his students. It is this that I would like to conclude with, because he lives on his memories. What he shared was very little. As Sri Desikachar has always told us, it was only after he passed on that many of us even realized his greatness. From here, I'm reading out the testimonies of students who were with Sri Kṛṣṇamācārya for well over 15 years towards the later part of his life. He could have made a career for himself in over a half a dozen fields, a professor of Sanskrit, Vedanta, Nyaya, or the head of a matha, or even a professional musician. He chose not to be any of these, though it would have provided him with a good security and status. He chose to be a yoga teacher at a time when the vocation did not command much favor. He believed that what one does for a living cannot conflict with the larger goals of life, which to him meant a greater awareness of the self leading to prapatti. A great innovator, he had the capacity to adapt tradition, to interpret it in today's context and innovate, while at the same time being rooted in tradition. Not only was he creative, he had the extraordinary capacity to impart the spark of creativity in others. His deep spiritual qualities and higher pursuits did not in any way imply a negation or withdrawal from the present reality. He took an active interest in current events and would also follow sports news with enthusiasm. Above all, he was a great traveler. Even in his 90s, he could recall in vivid detail the various rivers, confluences, and trails in the Himalayan regions where he spent his youth. He was a firm believer in Ishvara, but very pragmatic in his approach, never forced his views on others. He always said that Sanatana Dharma was rich and complex, with varying strands and lines of thought that appear confusing. An extraordinary feature of Acharya was his capacity to synthesize these apparently varied features and see them and present them as features and facets of one coherent theme, which was what the Indian tradition was to him. This is Sri T.V. Venkatraman, a very well-known scholar. According to Sri Kṛṣṇamācārya, the Sutra on Ishvara Pranidhana provides the firm motive for the observance of yoga. There can be no surrender of oneself to Ishvara unless you recognize Ishvara. Ishvara has to be recognized, has to be experienced, and this experience is a part of your total being, and you have to understand the existence of Ishvara as a part of your being. When you do that, Yoga Paddhati becomes clear. Ishvara Pranidhana has been brought to the fore by Sri Kṛṣṇamācārya, and I consider his explanation a beautiful synthesis of the Yoga Marga with the Bhakti Marga. There is a surrender unto Ishvara. There is a restraining of senses and your own ego in terms of the path which is laid out in front of you. And yoga helps you to still yourself and you experience the state of divinity. When I read this, it struck me that here is an interpretation which suits the requirements of the modern man, the man who's so caught up in his senses with his self. Now, just to enable you to forget that self and to see the real self, it seems to me is the path which has been indicated by him. These are reminiscences of Sri Desikachar when Kṛṣṇamācārya was alive. What he says is based on what he does. He says that knowledge is not always memory. Every day there must be something new. This is very significant because you cannot contain the teachings of Sri Kṛṣṇamācārya into a box. He says he developed so much in his teachings, made so many changes that I don't think anyone can identify Kṛṣṇamācārya's style. One person will say one thing and a few minutes later, someone will say, no, this is what he taught me. So fortunately, it solved the problem of the Kṛṣṇamācārya style. This was a big debate in the 90s and the 2000s about what the right Kṛṣṇamācārya style was. It's a continuing debate. But Desikachar says here so beautifully that he was always innovating, always bringing in new methods, new processes while being rooted in the tradition. This is again a very beautiful memory. As I remember when my father taught us texts, he made us learn it by heart. He had his own way of reciting. We had to repeat it like he taught us. Yoga Rasya, Chandogya Upanishad, Sankhya Karika, and even Brahma Sutra. In fact, I never realized that these may not be notated till I saw the books. In his collection was a book, 108 Upanishads, that was not notated. He himself notated most of the mantras he taught. The manner of recital would vary from text to text. My mother, who did not know Sanskrit, would be able to say whether it was, I'm sorry, there's a mistake there. With certain texts like the Bhagavad Gita, he used to have a characteristic way of reciting what Krishna said, and a different manner for what Arjuna said. It would vary from text to text. My mother, who did not know Sanskrita, would be able to say whether it was Ramayana, Mahabharata, or Rahasya Traisaram from the method of recitation. This is a beautiful memory, and it speaks to the power of the Sanatana system of education, of what those deep-rooted, value-based educational systems did, not just for Kṛṣṇamācārya, but for those who were associated with him for the longest part of his life. Another important feature of his teaching was his keen sense of observation. This is something reported by many students. He would often sit in a chair, read a newspaper, and teach an asana practice. And then he would make observations. If you questioned him, he would say, you can leave the class. But listening, there are students who have narrated this to us. He would read the paper and he would tell the student, go back and come back after a week you have not practiced. The student would say, how? You haven't seen me. And he would say, I could hear you breathe. As my mother says, he never sees with the eyes, he sees with the eyes closed. It's not just the observation of whether the person's head goes this way or that, or the eyes are open. The observation has a depth which can only be seen to be experienced. He also had a tremendous grounding in Veda and Veda Adhyayana to the point where the Panditas, the Shastris were terrified of coming to their homes for any ritual. Again, this is something that Sir Desikacharya has told us about. Here he shares his experience of the Upanayana for his children that took 3 days because Kṛṣṇamācārya insisted on doing it in a certain manner. This is one of his oldest students, again, Srimati Mala Srivatsan, former trustee of the KYM. His life was one immersed in bhakti, bhakti to Ishvara, bhakti to his gurus, bhakti in his duties and bhakti in his teachings. He in turn inspired bhakti in all those fortunate to have learned from him. His wisdom encompassed not only such subjects as Shastram, Tarkam, Vyakaranam, and Yoga, to name a few, but all aspects of daily life and how one can constantly be aware of the presence of Ishvara. Special mention needs to be made of the practical nature of his teachings and how he could explain them in the context of the current age. This knowledge, together with the spirit of his presence, continues to enlighten and inspire us even today. In conclusion, the words of my Acharya, Shri Desikacharya, my father could speak about all the darshanas because he was an authority on Veda and Vedanta, and such an authority should have a grounding in all schools that Vedanta refutes. This includes Buddhism and Jainism. He even knew the tenets of Islam and could speak a little Urdu. He was a great believer in equality of learning opportunities. This is again a testimony to Kṛṣṇamācārya's magnanimity, his forward thinking. He was a man far ahead of his times. He would always say there are only 2 jatis, man and woman. This is the only difference that we must be aware of. He respected this difference in what he taught and how he taught. He was a Vedantin because that was the tradition of his family. He became a Yogacharya because his teacher asked him to spread the message of yoga. At heart, he was a Bhakta and a Bhagavata. And after all this, Shri Desikacharya says, I'm just a postman delivering his teachings. With deepest gratitude to this Guru Parampara, without whom I would not be here standing before you. My namaskarams at the lotus feet of Shri Kṛṣṇamācārya and to the memory of Shri T.K.V. Desikacharya. Shri Krishna Gurave Namaha. Be happy to take questions if there are any.
Thank you very much. That was an amazing presentation, Nrithya ji. You brought out that polymath personality of Kṛṣṇamācārya ji. I think otherwise this would not have come out into the world. Probably all the Shishyas at the Mandiram may know this background. But the general world generally does not know this multidisciplinary, multi-shastra background of Guruji. There is one question with a little problematic wording. Adbhuta Vachanam, Nrityaji, Dhanyavadamastu. What is the Mandiram's view? How should we Shishyas relate to those Americans who behave as pishachas. Please, Eva Bakashi, we should not use such words in public forums. Questioning Sri Kṛṣṇamācārya's legacy. They write books based on sheer moha and misinterpretation. Can we correct them with respect? Yeah, this is a good word, with respect. So you have not used that word with respect. we should be careful. So the whole point is that there is a misrepresentation of the legacy of our gurus, yoga gurus, by some Western scholars. The questioner, Evam Bakeshi, is the name. I don't know what is the actual name. This Eva Bakeshi. Seems to be an actual name only. Thank you, Eva Bakeshi. Now, Nrithya ji will answer your question.
I think, as I mentioned, Gurum Prakashiyet Dhiman, what we can do is to go on speaking the truth and to speak the truth with authenticity. I think the KYM and even Sri Kṛṣṇamācārya himself, in his own lifetime, did not care. There are so many articles that he has written that he would give to his students that they later published as their own. And when Deshikachar asked him, he said, how does it matter? The message has to go out to the world. That was the kind of man he was. I think that was the nature of much scholarship then, that they were not worried about who said what about them. To some extent, I think the Kṛṣṇamācārya Yoga Mandram also shares the same legacy, the same perception, because this is also what Sri Desikachar lived and taught us, that that we continue to do what we do, we speak our truth with authenticity, and when the time comes, it will be revealed. I think the purpose of forums such as these is to establish such authenticity.
Eva ji, I should share with you that Nrithya ji has presented at least 2 papers in our own INDICA platform, countering the misrepresentations of yoga and yoga sutras and pedagogy by the Western scholars. We might provide you the links. If you contact Nrithya ji, she will provide you the links to those talks where she countered the Western scholars. There is another anonymous attendee saying, great presentation. There was an incident at Calcutta University also where the PhD panel was stunned by his learning. There was some disagreement between them, and but in the end, they awarded him the degree. I forget where I read it. Okay.
Nagaraji, if I may add, there he was a master of Tarka. There is a story that in Hassan there was a drought, and they had to perform a Pashu Bali Yajna. And there was the Hassan is a major center of the Jaina community, and there was a great opposition from the Jaina scholars at that time. And the Maharaja of Mysore deployed Kṛṣṇamācārya to have a vada with them, and he established using the principles of ahimsa. Again, speaking of apat dharma, how it was mandatory that the sacrifice of that one pashu could save the life of countless humans and animals. And so he seems to have been a Tarkika Simham as well.
Absolutely. Great.